This is the 46 of 46 podcast Summit Sessions, where we'll talk all things Adirondack, backcountry, and beyond. From high peak stories and adventures to trail tips and tricks, we'll dive deep into the heart of these mountains and the people who passionately climb them. Adirondack maps and spruce traps, bushwhacks and backpacks. It's all here on the 46 of 46 Summit Sessions. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 46 of 46 podcast Summit Sessions. It's a beautiful sunny spring day right here in the Adirondacks, and it is fantastic to see some nice blue sky, green grass. The mountains look phenomenal as they're snow-capped on top and green on the bottom. It is a spectacular time to be right here in the heart of the High Peaks region in the Adirondack Mountains. But this week, we're going to hear all about a very recent fishing and paddling adventure. My guest, Jay Wojcik, is going to tell us about his 10-day solo trip in the St Regis area of the park, doing some fishing, some paddling, and having his own Adirondack adventure, complete with getting snowed in at a lean-to. Yes, he was out there in the woods during the 8 to 10 inch snowstorm that we had. So we're going to hear the whole story and hear all about his Adirondack adventure tonight. So without further ado, Jay, thanks for coming on the 46 of 46 podcast and welcome to the show.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you are fresh off of quite the adventure that you had paddling and fishing around the park, including being caught in an absolutely atrocious spring Adirondack snowstorm where we got like maybe 10 inches of just wet, gross snow. So I look forward to hearing all about that. We're going to go through your whole story, start to finish of why you were out there, what you were doing, how it was, how the fishing was too. But before we get into that, why don't you just hit me with a little background about yourself? Tell us about what you like to do in the outdoors, how you got into the outdoors, how you came to the Adirondacks, all that good stuff. Give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, so like you've mentioned, my name is Jay. I'm 31, and I've been coming to the Adirondacks since I was a kid. My family has a camp right on First Lake in the Fulton Chain. So I've always been going up there, and we camped at some campgrounds and stuff, but it's a lot more recent, in the past probably 3 years, that my girlfriend and I really started getting out in the canoe and getting out more into the backcountry and doing trips that didn't really revolve around being at the camp, but actually camping out and stuff like that. And it's been a lot of fun. We've recorded almost all of our trips and turned them into YouTube videos on the Dax Woods Wanderer channel. And we just love it up here. Everything from the history to the scenes you get to the fishing and paddling opportunities. It's just unbeatable to me.
Yeah, it's a pretty fantastic place. And there's so many different things that you can do up here. I mean, it really is. I say it often. It is an outdoors paradise, this park. From the hiking to the paddling sports, rock climbing. I mean, like anything you want to do in the great outdoors. I dare you to find a better place and a more accessible place in general than the Adirondacks. And there's just so many places to do everything. So I want to mention too, so we talked off the air, you've spent a lot of time outdoors, but you've never hiked, which I found I loved when you said that. You've never gone hiking. You've obviously hiked around and you're in the woods all the time, but you've actually never purposely, the goal of the day was to hike up a mountain. And I love that because you can spend an entire lifetime outdoors, like in the woods at all times, without hiking being your the task of the day. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's a great message for people to hear, that there is so much you can do in the outdoors and it's not just hiking. And I love that. So talk to me a little bit about this trip. So you were out there for 10 days. So this would have been like mid-April. You were out there for 10 days, and why did you go out? What was the point of this trip? And let's just hear kind of the whys and what your itinerary was before we get into the day-to-day of the trip.
Absolutely. So it started my trip actually on Friday, April 15th. And leading up to that had been days of me watching various Adirondack webcams that face out to the ponds and lakes, just waiting to see that ice retreat. And basically days after it started the trip was formed. It was going to be mostly me solo, with Stephanie joining me the very first night. And then for the last 2 nights, I would join my buddies John and Logan from the ADK Addicts YouTube channel. And the whole point of the trip was really to just get out there and catch some fish, catch some trout, get back into that Adirondack scenery that I had been missing all winter, and just get out there and camp and paddle. And I wanted to make it a long trip, and I knew there was a chance of snow. I didn't expect what I got later, but it still ended up being a great time. I saw many more people than I expected to, and just got to soak it all in for a great 10 days.
Yeah, the snow that we got, nobody was expecting that snow. So in case you aren't aware, I don't remember what the date was, but I'm sure we could figure it out based on your trip, because you know what day it hit while you were out in the woods. But we got a snowstorm with 10 inches of snow, and it was wet snow. I think it was like around the 20th of April, somewhere around there. But it was like wet, gross snow. Yeah, you'll probably know the exact date, but it was terrible. And it's funny, when you were out in the woods during that snowstorm, I was in my house and I was like, this is the worst. This is the worst day of my life. And I even said to my wife, I said, I am so glad I'm not out in the mountains right now. And it's funny enough, you were, but we'll get to that. So you did most of this trip solo. So you said you started with your girlfriend, and then later on you met up with some friends towards the end. But the whole 3/4 of the trip was solo. Was there a reason you went by yourself, or was it more of just like necessity? You want to go out and there's no one else to go with you, sort of thing? Or did you want to go solo?
It was very much me wanting to go solo. I love solo tripping. I don't know why. I feel like it's just, you make your own schedule. You're not really, I don't mind catering to other people when on a trip, but like when you're by yourself, it's, you make the fishing schedule, the moving schedule. You could choose when to pack up and everything. And I really enjoy it. That being said, I love when Stephanie can come out with me, but she doesn't have as many opportunities with the work she does and everything. So when she gets a chance, she does get out there. But a lot of my trips, if anyone follows along with them, are completely solo usually.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to be said about going out into the woods by yourself. Most of the hiking that I do is by myself, and although for me, it's just out of necessity, because I can't get someone to come with me often. But then a lot of times, I want to start early, and I have there's certain activity I'm doing or whatever. So I have also come to be quite fond of the solo trips into the woods, and I always encourage people to embark solo on some trips and some hikes and just some backcountry adventures, because it really creates a totally different experience when you're by yourself versus when you're with someone. Like when you're not having conversations with people, because typically when you're with others, you're having conversations that kind of always, for the most part, revolve around like life back at home, not out here in the woods. And then when you're solo, though, it's just you and the woods. You experience it different. And I'm sure that's probably a big reason you go out solo so often.
Absolutely.
So now when you're looking for a backcountry adventure, you always gravitate towards paddling and fishing. Am I correct?
Yeah, those are really the primary things that gets me out there. The camping too. I mean, that can't be understated. Bringing some good food out there with you, or
for sure
dehydrating it yourself at home.
Yep. Very cool. Yeah. So for starters, how was the fishing? The fishing season just opened up. So how was the fishing?
It was actually really good. I caught a few nice trout. I caught a brook trout, a really nice one on one pond, and then a few lakers on another. And other people I ran into were doing really well. And my buddies John and Logan got into some really like almost trophy size for the area we were in, splake and lake trout.
Very cool. Very cool. So now you guys you were in the like the Fulton Chain area. Is that correct? Or no,
This trip was actually in the St Regis canoe area.
Canoe area. That's right. That's right. So now you were on a ton of different ponds, which clearly, and when I say ponds, clearly means there's going to be a lot of portaging involved with your trip. So how did you go about figuring out, okay, so I'm going to be out there for 10 days. Here's where I'm going to go. Here are the ponds I want to go. And obviously you're solo because you mentioned that. So you can go wherever you feel like going. How did you personally plan, okay, so I'm going to go to this pond and then I'm going to portage over here and go to this pond? Like, how did you put that itinerary together for yourself?
Well, I guess the first thing that definitely needs to be mentioned would be the series of Adirondack paddlers maps that are out there that show you all the water bodies, campsites, public land, carries in between and everything. Those maps are invaluable, and I always take one for the region I'm in with me, and I had one on this trip, obviously. And normally for a trip like this, extended with distance, there would be a lot more planning, where I'm going to be on X day, how many miles I want to make. But if anyone ever gets a chance to look at a map of the area, you can see that all of these ponds have many carries that connect them all into just this sort of network of ponds that you could easily, I'm looking at, my map right here where I started on Way Pond. I could have easily taken the carry out on the west end or the east end and still ended up in exactly the same places. It offers you a lot more freedom. So I didn't really have to plan where I was going to be on what day. I had a rough idea of where I wanted to be, but it was able to be changed on the fly, and actually did, because I wanted to beat the snow by securing a lean-to and not being in my tent when that heavy stuff started falling.
Just listening to you say that, it's like, I couldn't imagine have been out there. Actually, to be honest with you, I would love to hear some more about what the woods were like, because when that snowstorm came, I mean, my neighborhood that I live in here in Lake Placid, I mean, I had full trees down. There are so many like huge limbs that snapped off, like very, very much alive, giant trees. It was brutal, actually, because the snow was so damn heavy. So I'm sure out in the woods, I mean, dude, if you were in a tent that night, that would have been super, super dangerous, given that, like, the type of snow that we got. So good on you for securing the lean-to. But yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
so, like,
I knew it would be the best bet.
Yeah, definitely. So you basically had, looking at your map, and you found, like, here's a good series of ponds, and I'm going to basically take 10 days and just fish this area, do some camping, do some fishing. And then from there, you figured out, during maybe like kind of game time decisions, okay, I'm going to go over here. Now I'm going to go portage over to this pond here. That's pretty much how you figured out where you'd go each day.
Exactly. And I knew where I was starting and where I wanted to end. And that was really the only consistent variables throughout the whole trip. And everything else was free to change on the fly if I wanted to.
Yeah. And that there's something to be said about that type of freedom. And, especially when you go on an adventure yourself, when it's just you, it's like, well, do I want to go over here today? Well, I have nobody to tell me otherwise. So sure. Do I want to go over here this day? Do I want to stay here an extra day? Yeah. There's nobody I'm not having to meet someone. I don't have to get back for anything. That I have all the time in the world. And yeah, it's a very freeing, time to be able to make such decisions like that. So let's get into it. Take me through the first day. So you were on all these different ponds. You even had a special dinner planned. Actually, before we even get into that, what is your canoe like? What was the gear that you brought, and what was the food that you brought?
Yeah, I guess we probably should go over that.
Yeah, why not?
I have a bit of a fleet of boats, actually, but the one that came on this trip was my Winona Solo Plus, a boat actually almost as old as I am. And it's 16.6 feet long, I believe. Claims that it's only 44 pounds. I think it's much less than that, in all honesty, but I've never stepped on a scale with it or anything. And the gear breakdown, pretty much, I knew that it was going to be cold. I knew that for a fact. So I don't really have ultralight gear to start with. And the gear that I use for when it's cold is definitely bulky. So I had my big 110-liter pack. It's a roll-down dry bag. It contained my sleeping bag, a 20-degree Nemo Tempo, I believe it is, and a liner that I also put in that to get it down a little lower. I brought my tent along, just your standard dome, not quite a backpacking tent. It doesn't go down that small. It probably weighs about 5 pounds, maybe a little less. About 20 inches long when it's all put together, when it's all down in its stuffed sack with the poles in there and everything.
Sure.
And an insulated big Agnes sleeping pad, which is also, you can imagine, pretty bulky. And then, other stuff I bring, I have to bring paddles. What also weighs me down and probably separates me from people who are just canoeing out there, I bring a fair amount of fishing tackle, which includes clamps that go on my canoe that rod holders can go on. So my rods can just sit in those while I troll around. I always try to make sure I've got an extra paddle. And the biggest thing, probably the heaviest thing throughout the whole trip, I tried to make sure I had at least 2 pounds of food per day. And on a 10-day trip, that comes out to be about 20 pounds worth of food. And all of that goes into a big 30-liter barrel from Recreational Barrel Works, which then goes in a barrel harness and on my back on the carry.
Yeah, that is not lightweight backpacking. That's for sure. This is a different animal that you're in, and I love that. It's definitely some heavy stuff. So when you are portaging, so you have your backpack on, then you have the food attached, and dragging the canoe behind you.
No, so usually I have to do these carries unless it's a very short one in what's called a double carry, which means taking as much of my gear to one side as I can on the first go, coming all the way back for the second load of gear, and then taking that out with me to the other side.
Got it.
So usually I can get my big green bag on my back and the canoe. Strapped inside the canoe will be the fishing rods and the paddles, the life jacket probably, and a couple other things that I'll usually put on both the front and the back to make sure it's equally balanced. And it's sort of, you're not really, if the canoe is balanced properly, you're not really doing much to keep it on your shoulders. It sort of just wants to stay there. If it's properly at that right center of gravity, it'll just sort of sit up on your shoulders. And with only a 40-ish pound canoe, and putting, I don't know, a 40-ish pound bag on my back, it's not that bad if it's not that far.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's very cool. I've never done any backcountry trips like this, like you're talking about with paddling. All of my paddling is just like, you park and launch and then come back. So I've never done like any sort of a trip like you're describing here. So this is fascinating for me to hear about. Very cool. So you got to take a couple trips sometime. So I do know that you mentioned there was one 2.5 mile portage. That must have been a bit of a beast, no?
There was one that was about 2.5 miles, and once we get to it, I had to do many carries over many miles the day that I tried to beat the snow.
Sure. Well, let's get into it then. Let's just talk about it. So I want to hear from day one. So day one, how did it go? Where were you? And just take us through the story. Let us live the backcountry adventure that you had through your words.
Yeah, so day one started me out on Way Pond, which kind of close to Upper Saranac Lake. Almost everywhere that I'm going to be is going to be close to there. But that is where we started out because I knew that you could just drive right into the campground and launch right into Way Pond, basically, from the campground, which wasn't currently operating, and I knew there wouldn't be a lot of people there. So Stephanie and I loaded up with all of our gear at that point, having both stuff for her to stay warm, her sleeping solution and all that, and then mine. So we loaded everything up on Way Pond, made our way out to the campsite out on there, got got everything set up. That's usually the first step we do is once we get to the campsite, making sure everything's set up, getting a little food ready and everything. And we basically that day just fished and camped and had our basically real first trip of the year.
Now,
and day one didn't. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when you're out there, what is the highlight for you? Is it more of the fishing, or is it more of the camping, or are they kind of equally, or like what is the real, like, the highlight moments for you when you're out there personally?
I say they're equal all the time, the camping and the fishing, but I had an incident on a trip one time where I lost all of the fishing gear the day before the trip was over. And I don't think it was just losing the fishing gear that put a real damper on the next day. I was real disappointed passing through a bunch of new water and not being able to fish it. I think the fishing is if I'm being realistic, a big priority for me.
Sure.
And then the camping, a very close second.
All right, cool. All right, cool. Continue.
Yeah, and our first day didn't really involve too much, It was just very basic. We got a few bites on the pond, but didn't land anything. I believe I brought beef stew, not even dehydrated like I would normally do, because I knew that she was taken off and she could take everything with her. So we had some real nice beef stew out there and basically just got to hang out and didn't really have too eventful of a day. The next morning was we did wake up to some actual snow accumulation though. And I remember Stephanie saying she specifically was not a fan of winter camping, didn't want to do any this year. And she was sort of joking around that somehow I still got her out winter camping when we woke up to a little bit of snow on that Saturday. Not as much as I would get later, but
it's
we got a little bit.
The Adirondacks in April, you know what I mean? ADK in April, it's always going to get snow, especially when you're out there.
Yeah, it should have been my first sign of what was to come later, for sure. And yeah, she took off Saturday then, pretty early after fishing. We got to do a little bit. We packed her stuff up, and after she took off, I spent a whole nother day on Way Pond, actually, just sort of relaxing, again, soaking in the spring and being glad that I was out there on an extended trip for the first time of the year. And I just fished more, took it real leisurely, and it really wasn't a super eventful day. I believe, because I still have actually my trip food plan here in front of me, to give you an idea of some of the stuff I bring along on these trips.
Definitely.
Early on, you can bring food that'll spoil if it's stuff that you're going to eat within the first day or two. So I was eating still really good at this point. It was eggs and bacon for breakfast, tuna wrap for lunch, and chicken curry, rice, and naan bread for dinner.
All right, you're eating pretty well.
Yeah, a little bit of fancy food out there for being out in the woods and everything. But yeah, it was just really relaxing and taking it easy and not having to make any miles that day, and just sort of getting ready for the trip ahead of me that would take me clear across this entire canoe area and up many miles north of where I started.
Yeah, sounds like quite the start to an adventure that is going to get drastically different as the days progress. But anytime I go backpacking, the same thing. I'm always taking real food as long as possible before you have to dig into that backpacker type of dehydrated food and stuff that you just doesn't really excite you, but it will help you perform better and survive. So yeah, good on you for taking that. So you also had quite the meal on what was it, on Sunday? You had quite the meal, Easter Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the next day here. And as I'm getting to that, I am curious. Have you ever tried dehydrating your own meals at home for your trips?
No, I have never done it myself. I've seen videos on YouTube of people doing it, but I have never personally done it. No.
You could save a lot of money and a lot less sodium than in those backpacker meals.
Oh, I
and
can
you
imagine.
Get a lot more options.
So you do it. Yeah. You do that yourself, then, obviously.
I do, yeah. I've gotten nailed down quite a few variety of meals that I could bring out with me, from dehydrated beef stew, chili. The curry that I had on the first couple days wasn't dehydrated, but I've dehydrated that. And you can make things like spaghetti quicker to rehydrate when you're out there instead of just boiling it for 11 minutes. If you
Sure.
cook it at home, dehydrate it, and then bring it out there, it pops back real quick. Stuff, all that stuff like that. Shepherd's pie is a real good one to rehydrate.
Really probably hits the spot too at that point in the day when you're out in the woods having an actual meal instead of, I mean, when I'm out there, I'm very big on like, I'm a bagel and peanut butter type of guy. It's like, it's easy to bring, good calories, and but not like, it's not exciting. It doesn't hit the spot after a long day in the woods.
No, after making a lot of miles, you sometimes want something a little more substantial in you.
Definitely. So how did Sunday go? So Saturday, you're by yourself now, doing some fishing around. How did Sunday go?
Yeah, so Sunday, I ended up moving on finally from Way Pond where I was. I made the pretty short carry into Copperas Pond. And along that carry, actually got to see some deer right up close to the trail, which was pretty cool. They came right up close. I got some footage with my GoPro and everything, and they had just absolutely no fear of me, just standing there watching me, which was really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And that the rest of the day would just take me into Copperas Pond, down Fish Creek until I come to a carry. Again, all of these fairly short. If anybody's following along on a map or anything, you could see these are all just real quick ones where I was able to load like 95% of my gear up and just haul it over real quick and then come back for a few loose random things. And following all those along took me into Follinsby Clear Pond. And then the shortest carry I think I did on this trip, literally taking the canoe up out of the water, up and over a tiny little hill, and then you plop it down into Horseshoe Pond, which is where I spent Sunday. And I think I got all of this done before like even 11 or 10 o'clock in the morning. So I was there pretty early, got to my campsite, and at first was a little annoyed because I thought there was a bag of garbage sitting right there. And I'm like, wow, why would someone do this? And go to lift it up, combine it with my garbage that I was carrying with me. And it turns out to be a bag of perfectly seasoned split wood there. Plenty of it to last me for the whole day. So I was like, oh, right on. Here we go.
Oh, there you go.
So,
especially with what's coming.
That cut down on a lot of work for the day. And that's what I finally got to do. I some serious like fishing on this pond for once, because the weather was working with me. It wasn't super windy this day. It wasn't super cold like it had been kind of so far. I had been dealing with a lot of wind and a lot of cold, and it just made it sort of miserable fishing. Whereas today was real different. The sunset was great, the sunrise on this pond, and the entire day casting and trolling around it. It was pretty productive and a really good time. And like we sort of alluded to, I'm Polish, so I made sure, knowing I was going to be out there on Easter, that I could make a kind of Polish Easter dinner, or as close to it as I could get out there in the woods like that, which consisted of things like kielbasa, white kielbasa soup, pierogies, mashed potatoes, babka bread I had with me. Just if anybody knows what any of those things even are.
Sounds like an absolutely fantastic meal to have at home, let alone in the woods.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't quite as authentic as my great-grandmother would have made it.
Course.
Some of the steps that I cut using prepackaged stuff might have her head spinning, but it was, I think she would have been proud with how I did for the circumstances I was under.
Given the circumstances, we can all give you a pass on that part of it, but good on you for still wanting to have that meal while you're out there. I applaud you.
Yeah, it was an interesting little thing. I had never spent a holiday really in the woods besides like birthdays for Stephanie and I. So it was kind of cool, kind of a cool little experiment, and cut a ton of weight off the barrel.
Sure, I could imagine that would be the case. So this was that was Sunday then, Easter Sunday, and I think was Sunday night when the snow came?
Sunday night is when I got the warning that Monday night
Oh, it was
into
Monday night.
Tuesday was going to be what my phone told me would be 8 inches of snow.
That's right.
Heavy, wet snow. And I'm looking at my tent, which has served me well throughout many insane windstorms and rainstorms. But I was kind of looking at it and starting to wonder, like, how would it do with 8 inches of snow piled up on it? Even if I was, mindful of trying to wake up every now and then and knock it off, I was a little worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what made me make the decision to suddenly speed up my trip and cover a decent, not a ton, but a little bit more distance than I had been planning for that day to get all the way up to a lean-to in the more northern remote ponds than these sort of lower, more easily accessible ponds here.
Okay. So now when you wanted to speed up your trip, did that mean you basically just decided, okay, I'm just going to paddle now to get to a lean-to that I'm trying to get to? Or did you still fish, but you just maybe didn't stay as long in each spot as you did, and maybe you moved further each day than you would have otherwise? Is that how you did, or how did you actually speed up to get to that lean-to?
Very much like you said, there wasn't a lot of stopping to fish. I wasn't taking it leisurely on the carries like I had been before that, just walking slow, doing a lot of filming along the way for the channel. This day, I was very much with a concentrated mind, dead set on getting somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And the lucky part, though, about how I do fish for trout up here is there's a lot of trolling involved, which I don't know if anyone's not familiar with that. It's casting a line out with a lure on it, a good distance behind your canoe there, and then just going at a speed that has that trailing behind you. And you'll eventually put that lure in front of something's face and probably get a bite.
All right. There it is. Trolling. Not to be confused with the internet trolling, which is much more unfortunate.
Yeah, maybe don't do that.
Yes, don't do that. Do the other trolling, not that trolling.
Yeah, it's always funny how words shape like that.
And then when you are doing that, you're still fishing. You're still fishing while you're paddling to get, paddling with a purpose, let's say, but you are still fishing. So like you kind of get, given the circumstances, you are kind of still getting the best of both worlds while you're trying to get from A to B on this day.
Absolutely. It still felt like at least I was, there was a chance maybe there'd be a little something to break up the paddling, a little action now and then along the way.
Sure. And was there something to break up the paddling?
There absolutely was not.
Bummer.
I attribute it to, because whenever my line would get like, if I went too shallow and it got hung up in something, I would just reel it up and keep going rather than fix it and be like, all right, I'm going to go back over that spot. It was very much a day of just like, well, nothing on this pond, on to the next one.
Sure. All right. So, and how far was that paddle to, by the way? Like, so that day, or was this, so this would have been Monday that you spent the day getting to where you need to go, correct? Because Sunday night you found out about the snow, so the next day would have been like, okay, not really doing much fishing today. I have to get to this lean-to because I don't want to be in my tent in the backcountry with 8 inches of so wet snow all over me. So what was the mileage like from where you were Sunday night to where you had to get for basically Monday night?
I believe I did the math, figuring that I would have to figure this out at some point. I believe I really only had to go as far as like the crow flies from where I was to where I was trying to get to. I believe it's only like probably a little over 8 or 9 miles. But what was slowing me down was that some of these carries on this day end up becoming very long and very muddy and flooded and with just constantly changing weather where it seemed like it was warm one moment and then it would become freezing. I was putting on layers and stripping them off. And this just became a lot tougher than I thought it would be. And I had been kind of warned that the carry trails that I was planning on taking to where I was going to get to, could be a little rough, but I had no idea the amount of blowdown that would be on them, the sheer uphill climb that they all seem to be. None of them seem to wrap around any of these mountains or elevation gains. They seem to go straight through it with, like you've talked on your podcast, just a drainage coming down those sections back towards you, where it was just like almost walking up a stream with how the water was flowing down these trails at the moment.
Yeah, 8 or 9 miles, that's not nothing. That was longer than I actually anticipated you saying. So to me, I hear that and I say, well, no, that's like, you got to get to that lean-to. That's all right, here's the day we have to get to that lean-to. So I get that was, it was longer than I expected. But yeah, those I can't imagine that those, I wouldn't call them necessarily trails, but I guess we'll call them trails that you're taking wouldn't get, they're probably not getting much love. They're just getting like kind of constant traffic from the paddling community, and maybe trails form over time. So I would have assumed that they would probably be pretty nasty.
Oh, they are.
Oh, they are.
I was honestly happy that the one they call the clamshell portage, I believe. That's what it's on as my map. I was very grateful that was even marked, because at some points of it did just become just this landscape of just mud and leaves, where I was like, wow, you had to almost look around for the next marker.
Mm-hmm. Sure. No, it makes perfect sense. So as the day went, you had some tough moments, but you obviously pushed through. And was there any time where you were like, I don't think I'm going to make it. I think I'm going to be out here in the snow? Or were you pretty good mentally and, time-wise to knowing like, yeah, I'm going to get there in time?
So I guess it just goes to show how much our memories can change of these trips, what we remember on the other side of it versus what was happening at the time. Because like I've mentioned, I film almost everything I'm doing. So I remember that day as being tough, but always being certain that I was going to get to that I was going to make it all the way to the lean-to. Well, while I started editing the footage and going through it, I noticed a clip that I don't even remember, where I got to the end of the first real rough carry, and I turned the camera on myself and I told it, well, I guess that's it, guys. I'm not making it to the lean-to today, because that was just too much. And there's no way that I'm going to be able to cover another. It would have been like roughly 2.5 miles of carrying my gear over another equally rough trail to the next pond with the lean-to I wanted to get to. So I guess it was in between that then and when I got there that, like I mentioned to you, I had been listening. I guess the first time I mentioned it now, throughout a lot of the day, I had been listening to your podcast, having it on at various points on the trail and stuff to, so it's something to listen to, not knowing I'm not going to disturb anybody else. There's no one else around or anything like that. So I had that on. And I think that it was at this point that I got to the episode where you were talking to someone about doing all 46 peaks in a single year. If you remember that one, I think it was one of your fairly early ones, becoming a 46er in 1 year from 350 miles away.
Sure. That would have been with John LaFanara from Buffalo. Shout out to John. Great story. But yeah, I remember that episode very well. Yep.
I think it was that one that I had on that really inspired me a bit. And that made me realize like I could keep going. These guys are talking about hiking and doing so many more miles than I actually have to do today on foot. I was like, it's crazy that I can't just tackle this last one. And that's really what I believe helped me power through that last one I had to do to get to the pond I wanted to be on with the lean-to and get myself settled in there. Because the very next clip in my GoPro, it's me at the lean-to remarking how I can't believe I got there.
That's great. Yeah, and that episode in particular, John has quite the story. And I mean, he got like just knocked in the face, figuratively, just time and time and time again. And he kept pushing, he kept grinding, he kept going towards the goal that he had. So I'm stoked to hear that was a somewhat of an inspiration for you to keep moving forward out there. And yeah, you made it. That's great. And the sense of accomplishment when you did get to the lean-to, on top of, just the relief, must have been enormous.
I don't even think I made dinner that night. I think I collapsed into my sleeping bag after getting it all set up and woke up at like 11 or 12 that night and finally made something to eat. Which sure. I guess should be mentioned. This day started with me being on the water at 8 a.m. and I did not get to that lean-to until 8 p.m.
Yeah, it's a long day. That is a long day. So you made it though. So that was good. You made it. Had it started, I don't think it started snowing yet because I went to bed. I'm at least in Lake Placid that night. I remember going to bed around like 10:30, and it still hadn't started snowing. And I was like, there's no way we're going to get any snow. It's not even snowing yet. And my God, was I wrong.
It's so funny you say that. It's so funny you say that because I started thinking the same thing when I woke up to make dinner later that night and looked out. And I was like, did I do all of this for nothing? And honestly, I wasn't so much worried about the physical exertion I put myself through. I started getting bummed out that there were a bunch of ponds that there was no way I was going back to fish.
Sure.
Even if the snow didn't come. So I was just like, oh man, I skipped all those ponds for nothing, but it came.
Oh, it came. All right. But so that means if you got up around midnight and you looked out and it wasn't really that snowy, that means it came even after that, which is just wild.
I believe it started around 1.
Sure.
Because the lean-to I was on had the wind. I was in a lean-to on the northern shore of this pond, and the wind was blowing straight into it. But I guess that's probably a frequent occurrence because someone before me had set up a tarp across the opening of the lean-to that you could easily roll down and bungee out, and it completely blocked any snow from getting in there. Because I believe, went to bed again and then was woken up by snow blowing into the lean-to there. And I had to roll that down and make sure that my sleeping bag didn't become soaked.
Oh, yeah. That reminds me of my very first night on the Northville-Placid Trail, going to sleep, having no idea that snow was coming, and then waking up in the middle of the night just covered in snow. Like, oh, my. And then, like, oh, dude, it's a terrible feeling when you wake up in the lean-to covered in snow. And I'm not talking like, oh, there's little, like, so there's like snowflakes, but like when the whole lean-to is white and your sleeping bag is white. Yeah, terrible feeling. But that's amazing that there was a tarp there. So many of these lean-tos, they face the lakes because it's like that. You want to wake up to that nice view, but then, the downfall usually is the wind going into the lean-to is not ideal. It doesn't block anything because you're getting the wind off the water. But cool that was there. So you made it though. That's great. You woke up, you went to sleep, woke up again, had some food. No snow yet. And then you woke up the next morning. So take us through what your brain was thinking when you woke up the next morning, because as I mentioned, the snow was not a light snow. We got a good 8 to 12 inches of snow everywhere, and it was wet, gross, thick, snowball, build a snowman type of snow. So what was going through your brain, and what did you basically decide, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do today?
Well, the day started off, I believe, with my girlfriend contacting me on the Zoleo that I always carry, a little satellite communication device that, when I'm outside of cell service, lets me talk to her.
Sure.
And she immediately wanted to make sure I was okay. She and people at home were rightfully worried, but she was able to put all of them at rest and, let them know that everything was fine. And yeah, I got getting a look out there upon first waking up. I just could not believe what I was seeing, the amount of snow out there. And it wasn't even apparently as bad as it had been in other places. I got kind of lucky here, and there was a lot of snow, but nowhere near what some other people got, or even back home in the Utica area where I'm from. It was apparently knocking out power and causing a ton of trouble. But it was still nerve-wracking throughout. I was consistently woke. It was not a good night's sleep that night because there was the constant crack of large breaking limbs coming down and hitting stuff all around me.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, I felt very secure in the lean-to, seeing carvings in there from like 1966. I was like, well, if it's been up since then, it's probably not coming down tonight.
Good point.
And, yeah, but still, it definitely wakes you up hearing those come down and the smaller ones hitting the top of the lean-to and everything. And waking up the next day was just surreal because the tarp didn't even cover the full opening of the lean-to. So there was like that triangle of white powder in there with me at the angles of the opening a tiny bit there. But me completely dry, nothing on me there.
That's great.
And taking a look around, I immediately realized like, wow, I'm spending a few days here. I don't think I'm getting out on any of these trails I came in on for the next few days, but that was totally fine because this was Tuesday morning. Then this would have been, and I knew I had, I wasn't going home till Sunday, so I had plenty of time to let it melt. And my Zoleo also gives me weather a few days ahead forecast, so I knew it was going to warm up enough that there wasn't going to be all this snow here.
Sure. Yeah. And that's, again, like we were talking about before, that's the beauty of you have this amount of time and you don't have anywhere to be. So at that point, it's like, well, I guess I'm going to be here for at least a couple days, maybe 3 days. That's fine. I have nowhere to be. Let's let it be what it's going to be. So that's, again, the beauty of the solo trip with a not really like an itinerary that you have to stick to in a sense.
Exactly. And the plan at the time was actually for my buddies from the ADK Addicts channel to come out to this same pond I was on a few days later and meet me. And at this point, I was still certain this snow would melt, and I figured they'd just haul their stuff in with no problem. But that didn't end up being the case either. We didn't meet up till the last 2 days of the trip due to that snow that came down.
Yeah, I bet. Now, did you go out and did you do any fishing that day? So I guess this would have been Monday that you woke up with the snow. So did you still go out on the pond and do some fishing? I would hope at least.
Well, no, I think Sunday night I got the warning.
Oh, that's
Monday
right.
night I made all those miles of travel. Yeah, I'm just trying not to confuse myself.
No, I'm confused as well.
No, it's all good. I'm sorry if I'm jumping around too. But yeah, so Tuesday then, I don't believe I did any serious fishing. It was mostly just me casting from shore, and the rest of the day spent really, looking for all kinds of downed and dead wood so that I could keep a fire rolling there. I had still, I believe still a little bit of bacon left with me, and I think I had that for breakfast. And I'm not really a coffee drinker, but I love hot chocolate, so I've always got a bunch of that with me. And it was basically a day of just staying warm. I brought a book with me. I always do. And I spent a bit of time reading that. And I always have podcasts loaded up on my phone like yours there. So I was able to spend some time listening to that. I think while I was hanging out there at the lean-to, I think that's when I hit the episode where you wake up with the snow, actually, and think I had a good laugh about the similar situation I was in.
Yeah, there you go. Now, what were the woods like that day out there? I assume, fresh snowfall. It's just you out there. There's nobody anywhere near you. Must have been a nice, quiet, and a really nice kind of vibe in the woods, I would imagine, that day.
All right. So the only reason I'm going to mention this is because I've heard you talk about people having similar experiences and you having similar experiences on your show. But the vibes weren't all super great that day.
Oh.
I am a person who's always very confident in the woods. I never get spooked. I never get bad feelings. I've just never been, nothing has ever scared me out there. I know there's bears, but they're nothing, you'll mostly see their back end running from you. And there's nothing that really gets me nervous out there. And
God, I love where this is going right now. Continue.
Yeah, I know. And it's so funny that this was my experience while I was out there. But man, the entire time that I was out there, I felt like watched. And it was a very weird feeling. There's a little stream right next to the lean-to I was staying in where I would get my water from. And I I've never felt so vulnerable as I ever did in my life. Every time that I would go to that stream and have to bend down and like lower my stance to get the water out of it, I felt just weird the entire time. I never saw anything. I never really heard anything out of the ordinary, but I've never, ever had an experience like this in all my time out solo in the Adirondacks.
Well,
which is many, many nights if you go through my YouTube channel.
Sure. Well, there you go. That's fascinating. And for all of you listening out there, I had no idea. That was just a general question. What was it like in the woods? So that was not prompted in any stretch of the imagination, but I find that story fascinating. And you could all probably sense the smile on my face when Jay started to talk about not being scared in the woods, and then I was just like, oh, this is where this is going. Yes. But anyways, yeah, that's a real thing. This whole idea of feeling like you're being watched in the woods and you're not there by yourself. And for some reason, simple things like, yeah, I'm just going to go refill my water bottle real quick. But certain times, for some reason, it's just like you're like when you try to go inside your house and you pretend someone's about to kill you outside. Can I get the keys out in time? Can I open the door? It's like, there's this weird feeling that you get, and I've experienced it as well, and as have others. But very interesting. So, did that feeling go away eventually, or was it always there?
Yeah, no, it was really only that day, and it wasn't. Okay. It wasn't a consistent thing. It would pass from your mind a little bit, and then there would be moments where I felt like if you've ever seen a deer suddenly pick its head up in the woods and be like, "Whoa, something's not right." I a couple times was hit with a pang like that, where I was like, man, this is weird. And I brought it up with my buddies who I met later, who have stayed at this lean-to many times. Mm-hmm. And apparently I'm not the only one who stayed at this place and had that feeling.
All right. Well, there you go.
Just throwing that out there. So I don't know. And it was very weird, it was very different for me.
Sure.
And it didn't like spook me so bad. I didn't like hide for the day or anything, but it was just strange, I guess, the only way to put it.
Yeah. And you were probably on somewhat of a unique alert in your brain for whatever reason, but cool. So you did some fishing from the shore that day, probably made some food, read some books, listened to some podcasts. So then I assume you just kind of played out the day and then went to sleep at night, and then tell us about the next day. So that would have been... So you would have woken up Tuesday was the day you woke up covered in snow, and that was snow everywhere. So what was Wednesday like?
Wednesday was not as great as I had hoped it would be, because that snow actually it didn't keep pounding like it did, but it sort of kept trickling down, and I felt like there was even more snow where I was at waking up Wednesday than there was Tuesday. But it was weird, because it also Wednesday seemed like it started melting and kind of clearing up a bit. And I believe that's when I finally got to actually get out in my canoe after, for the first time in my life, having to like brush ice off it like it was the window of my car. Sure. I had to like clean the canoe off before I got it in the water, which I guess since we're on a podcast here, we probably should talk about. People, you have to wear your life jacket in the canoe and like be super careful this time of year, because hypothermia is a real thing with the water. Mm-hmm. And, the cold temperatures in the air. So definitely, if you're going to go out there in the spring and do a trip like this, be confident in your skills and be able to, do what you have to do to not fall in, because that's really a bad thing. That's a big difference, I guess, between hiking and being out in that canoe in the water like that after ice out. It could definitely get dangerous.
Yeah, you're definitely you're in a much more vulnerable position, state on the water than you are like on the trail, for sure.
Yeah, I believe actually while I was out on this trip, when I got home, I believe I saw a news article that 2 boys in Vermont or somewhere had died in their canoe while I was out on this trip, falling in and becoming hypothermic.
That's tough. That's brutal.
Yeah, so it's definitely something you really need to, don't get super excited just because the snow and ice is gone, and hop in your canoe and paddle out there, make sure you know what you're doing and be careful.
Yeah, it's brutal, but it is indeed a reality of, going out into the woods and doing these activities. So it is worth discussing and worth talking about and worth mentioning because, I say it all the time, the mountains, they do not care about you. They don't give a damn about your precious little soft feelings. You have to respect it. And if you don't, you'll be put in your place. So that's why whenever you go out, no matter what activity you're doing, be prepared and respect nature because it will teach you a lesson real quick and not even flinch if you're not ready. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that's an important thing to note. 100%.
Oh, for sure. But not to put a damper on because nothing like that happened there. The rest of the day, actually, I got to get out there and do some fishing, and
That's
I caught
awesome.
some beautiful lake trout out in this pond here. Some of the most vibrant colors I've seen on a fish in a while. They were super pronounced and super feisty. Fought me right to the boat.
Very nice.
Wednesday I had a ton of fun despite the snow. It was for me a little, I guess, foray really into winter camping and kind of getting me into something I've never really done a ton of.
Sure. No, that sounds like a great time. And fortunately, it temperature wise, that snowstorm, it didn't get like, we weren't like we weren't in single digits or even approaching that, but we got snow. So fortunately, your 20-degree sleeping bag was plenty for those temperatures. Were you cold out there though at all at night sleeping?
No, I'm a super warm sleeper, so I was completely fine. My girlfriend Stephanie though has the exact same sleep system that I have. Down the degree rating, everything is exactly a mimic of mine. She freezes out there in that type of temperature with hers. It's just I guess just how much body heat you produce or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that day was good, and then you did some fishing, and then your friends came and met you shortly after that. And how'd that go? Once they arrived, how did that change the trip for you?
That was definitely a big change because by this point in the trip, I am completely out of fresh food. I'm eating dehydrated meals that I made at home and are good, but it's just not fresh food, And I actually had a couple more days of this because at this point it would have been only Wednesday and I didn't see them till Friday morning. So I had all of Thursday as well that I was just fishing and really relaxing on this pond. I kept trying to check the trails that led out of it. And I just realized that that there was no way to connect with my buddies yet, that we'd have to wait till Friday. Mm-hmm. And what we ended up doing was actually having them, just to make things easier, they came up a ski trail to meet me instead of going through the couple ponds that would lead you to where I was and having to get in and out and carry a bunch of gear. We decided it would be easier for me to just move to the pond that they're staying on a couple miles over to the east there. And like I said before, we were able to keep in communication because they had cell service where they were and I had my Zolio. So we were able to send messages back and forth and talking about it. It seemed like the easiest thing to do rather than having them come out there and then all of us coming out Sunday would have been to just have them come to me with no gear. And then instead of double carrying this, I believe it's like a 3.5 kilometer long ski trail to get to the pond they were on. They very graciously, and again, I can never thank these two enough for coming out there and helping me do this because it definitely would have been just another heavy, long carry on this trip. But they came out there with no gear from where they were staying, helped me get everything over this ski trail. We all carried a bit of stuff, took our time, and got out to the pond they were staying on, got to the lean-to they were staying on, and just continued to have a great time fishing. And we were all shocked when that day, that pond, it has a good, I want to say 5 or 6 campsites on it besides the lean-to we were staying at. All of it already filled up that early in April by the end of the day Friday.
Sure. Not surprising, to be honest with you, at that point, too. But it's unfortunate, when you're out there, you kind of want it to yourself and that stuff, but not that surprising, I guess. But that's
Yeah,
amazing
I
that
mean,
they came out for you. That's what it's about. Like, oh man, that friendship and that, let's do things for each other in the outdoors for the greater good of having a great experience. And like, oh, you need some help? I got you. Let me come help you. I love that. That gets me so fired up.
Yeah, those two are great. We've been fishing together since we met up for the first time last year to do some fishing, and I've been getting trying to get some trips in together and everything. And I just could not thank them enough for making that day easier on me, because I had been through I had definitely racked my body earlier in that week getting up there to the pond I was on.
Yeah, I could imagine. And at that point too, you've been out there for quite a few days. Quite a few days at this point. So yeah, you're a little tired. You're a little tired, and you're a little worn, I should say, at that point.
Yeah, and meeting up with them, they had all fresh food with them and stuff. I think we got back to the campsite and they made hot tomato soup and grilled cheese and ham on this artisanal garlic bread. And the first just couple bites of that, after eating my dehydrated meals for the last 4 or 5 days, I felt this like surge of energy shoot through me. I was like, oh my God, this is what it's about right there.
There it is. Yeah, man, that and some grilled cheese and some soup and some fishing and some camping. There it is. That is what life is supposed to be. Well, this is great. Oh yeah, we've been talking about an hour now, so we're going to start to wrap things up. It sounds like your adventure was overall, after you got over that hump, you had that little middle stretch with the snow and trying to beat the snow and getting to the lean-to, and then dealing with what you dealt with the next day at the lean-to. Done. And then eventually after that, sun came out. It was a nice fishing trip. You caught lots of fish. You met up with some other friends, and it sounded like it ended on like a really positive note.
Oh, absolutely. It was great meeting up with them, and we had a few ponds in between us and where we left, and we just got to travel through some incredibly scenic views, see some amazing sunrises, some amazing fish caught as well. It was just, your perfect Adirondack canoe trip, even with the hardship early on.
Oh, the hardship is what makes it worth telling the story about, and then you just appreciate it more. It's, like I've said it a million times. There's so many times where I'm out in the woods and at that moment I hate this, and then I say to myself, I'm going to really like telling this story later, but right now it all sucks so bad. And sometimes that's just what it's about. There's just, in the moment, it kind of sucks, but this will be a fun story to tell later. And overall, like your story, your adventure, as I like to call it, it had everything, the highs, the lows, the really highs, the really lows. So like, that's what it's about. And I imagine when you got home, after 10 days in the Adirondack woods fishing, I would imagine that you probably your soul was rejuvenated in a sense. If I'm a betting man,
it definitely was. But like I do every time, I immediately got home and started planning the next trip.
There it is. I love it. I know that very well. Cool, man. Well, on this podcast, I like to end each episode asking a couple quick fun questions. So no wrong answer, but we'll ask you a couple questions. What's something unique to you that you always have to keep in your pack? Let's say for you fishing, or what's something that's fun that you always have to have when you're out there?
It is a very basic camping item, nothing to do with fishing. My moose skin moccasins that my girlfriend got me.
All right.
As my camp shoes. They are super comfortable, super warm. I couldn't go camping without them.
I love it. I love that answer. That's a fantastic answer. Now, my second question, in your opinion, what makes the Adirondack Park such a unique place?
I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's so many things, from the history to the sights and the views. But I think even more importantly, the freedom that you had, that I have on this trip. I didn't have to make reservations for a campsite. I didn't have to get a permit. I didn't have to go jump through any special hoops. I just got to go where I wanted to go out in the backcountry with nothing constraining me or holding me to a time slot or anything like that. I feel like that's so important, to feel truly free on these trips.
Oh, if
that makes sense.
Oh, it does. I love your answer, and I commend that answer, and I feel exactly the same way. A fantastic answer in response to that question. And so as we wrap this up, where can people find you online?
Dax Woods Wanderer on YouTube, Instagram. I've tried to make a TikTok, but I think I'm just too old for that.
I feel the same way.
But yeah, those are where you could find me, and you could follow along with all of my adventures that I go on.
All right. And is there a video for this exact adventure up on your YouTube channel yet?
There is a trailer up of just some short clips with some music behind it, and I am well underway working on editing the video and getting it together. Thing that just slows me down is I think it was Jonathan Zaharik on your podcast mentioned, I don't like to let the editing get in way of the tripping. So, when we're going out every weekend, it's just sometimes the video sits half edited until I get home.
Yeah, I know how that goes with my podcast. I'm not going to not go out into the woods and go hiking because I have to be home. I have to edit this. It's no, I'm going to go out and live the life in the woods, and then I'll get to this stuff, secondary. And I think anyone who is out there can appreciate that and respect it, and would do the exact same thing. You can't sacrifice the time doing what you want to do to tell the story about it from another time. I love that. But anyways, I think we'll wrap up this episode right there. Jay, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It was awesome hearing your story. It was a very different type of story that we haven't had on the show, and I loved hearing it. It had everything that I like about his story, from ups and downs and pushing yourself, and the highs, the lows, and overall just a great backcountry adventure. And thanks for coming on the show, and thanks to everybody for checking out this episode. Go check out Jay's YouTube channel, Dax Woods Wanderer. It's on YouTube, and that'll do it. Check back on Fridays for new mountains, new stories, new guests, and new episodes right here on the 46 of 46 podcast. And if you got a second, head over to 46of46.com. Check out everything that I have to offer on that website. More info on the podcast, a blog, a merch store. If you're looking for a guide, you can check me out on there. If you're looking to hike the high peaks, I have an ebook that's out now that will be the perfect start for you to get all the information you need to have a successful journey through the 46 high peaks right here in this beautiful Adirondack park. But that'll do it. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. And if you go camping, you go canoeing, bring that life jacket. See you on the trails, everybody.